let us steady ourselves and ready ourselves for our Torah study. So, it'll be a nice palate cleanser for my day to do a little bit of Torah study. That'll be very nice. So we're on a new topic today, thanks to good Lord. We're going to study Psalms, which I think will be fun. I think liturgical poetry will be very interesting. Today we're just going to do an introduction to it and read a couple of Psalms and sort of see what we think. I love Psalms because it's actually one of, if not the oldest part of the Hebrew Bible, is the book of Psalms. We have a sense that these Psalms were written over 5 centuries and go back to really, even times in the monarchy, when David was alive, when Solomon was alive, that these Psalms were likely written then and, beginning to get codified then. So the word psalm comes from the Greek psalmos, which is basically a translation from the Hebrew word mizmor, which means song, basically. It means a song especially that is recited to the accompaniment of a stringed instrument, to some kind of musical instrument, which again, I think is cool. I think that means early on, 922 BCE, they were singing these psalms and jamming along on a guitar, or like their version of a guitar. I think it's a nice sort of connector in a way, that they were singing these out loud as people would come to the temple to offer sacrifices. And so if we have a psalm like Psalm 29 that we're actually going to discuss a little bit in the next class, that seems like it came from even like in the wilderness, from like early Canaanite sort of worship, while others that were sort of clearly written in the post-exilic period, from times after the Babylonian exile, 586, 536, sort of late 6th century BCE. So it has that span from like 1,000 to 600 to 500 that these are being written. Some of them really explicitly do refer to sacrifices and almost give you like a vision and how they would be sung, in accordance with the ritual. But it is difficult because some of the language in Psalms, because it's poetic and because it's very specific to what they're doing, it's hard to translate. There's a Greek phrase, Greek or Latin, my brain, not enough coffee. Hapax legomenon. Hapax legomenon means that it's a word in the Torah, a word in the Bible that is only used once. And so you have sometimes a word that's only used one time, so you don't have any other places to compare it to get an idea of what the translation is. Because it's only used once, and there's no other context, you have to try to sort out what it might mean, as opposed to if it's used 50 times in 50 different contexts, you can get a sense of what it means. And so they have a lot of those in the Psalms, so we're trying to say words that are not really used very frequently. And so it's hard to always get a direct translation. Plus, by their nature, these are supposed to be poetic, right? They're supposed to be musical. And with music and poetry, you don't always get a great literal translation, right? It's supposed to be more flowery and more metaphorical than it is meant to be straight prose. The Psalms themselves, one of my favorite things about the Psalms is that they're very emotional, right? There's a lot of feeling involved in them. And the feelings, we often think of Psalms as just like words of praise and prayer. And they have a lot of them like that, right? That are praise to God for X. It's our duty, our obligation to praise God. Let's give thanks to God, for God is good, etc., etc., etc. And you have other Psalms that are Psalms of lament, some of communal lament, some individual lament. They pray to God, they invoke God's name, and they basically complain. And they say, these are all the horrible things that are happening. Come help us. Amen. So some of the Psalms are a little bit more dramatic and a little bit more melancholy, than other ones that are like, yay, things are great. Let's all sing and dance together. And I guess for me, what I like about that is that it shows us that even, 1,900, 800 BCE, they were struggling with some of the same emotions we have in prayer today. that there are some times when we pray, we feel really good, and we want to pray to God because things are going great, and we want to express our gratitude and our praise to God. And other times we got troubles, right? We're feeling lousy. We're feeling, a lot of stressors in our lives, and we pray for help. We pray, we call to God and say, hey, God, are you out there? If so, a little help would be nice, right? And so the same feelings we have today are also affirmed in these Psalms from thousands of years ago. One more thing I want to mention before we actually dive into the Psalms themselves is that we often have the rabbinic tradition in our mind that the Psalms were written by David. As I mentioned, not so much, because they take place again over that 500-year span. Some say, this is a Psalm of David, and what it likely refers to is in the style of the Psalms that were done in the time of David, more than David himself. Plus, like anything else, it's a better seller, right? If it's from David, it's more easily canonized. If it's from King David than Joe Schmo Jew down the street who wrote something, it's say, hey, David wrote it, therefore you must sing it, because it's David, not Herschel the cobbler, who's very poetic. So that's why they like having these books ascribed to biblical figures like David and Solomon and others. With all that being said, I'd like to dive right in, honestly, and read a couple Psalms. We're going to do it a little differently. I'm going to use actually the website itself, Safaria, and we'll read some Psalms together and get a sense of it. There it is. Okay. That's not going to work like that. Okay. Better. Everyone sees what I got? Yep. Okay. Brahms, you want to give it a read to start?
Happy is the man who hath not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of the Lord and his delight, and he studies that teaching day and night. He is like a tree planted beside streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades, and whatever it produces thrives. Not so with the wicked, rather, they are like the chaff that wind blows away. Therefore, the wicked will not survive judgment, nor will sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord cherishes the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is doomed.
Doomed. Thank you. Okay. And so what do we have? And this is also, again, one of those moments I always like to mention, this is the kissing the bride through the veil issue. When you read these in English, it does take a little bit away from it. The Hebrew is much better. When I read the translations, like, oh, but that being said, it does give us some sense of what we're looking at here. So first, our first psalm is about what?
Righteousness.
Righteousness? Yeah. I think how to live a righteous life, in consonance with the teachings of God, right? And so God, in this psalm, plays the role of teacher, right? God is the revealer of Torah, and that if you do the right things, if you do what God has taught us, and makes that a central part of one's life, then that's all for the best. And if not so much, right? So the first part, and the first was actually been used a lot, Asherei Ha'ish, the idea that it's better for us, right, when we're in group gatherings, we have to sort of know where we are and know who we're hanging out with. And because sometimes we are, in fact, judged by the company we keep. And if we're hanging around with a lot of bums, we're going to be a bum too. We're going to not be a good person, as well. And so here, the righteous person has to separate themselves, right? Do not join in the company of people who are going to lead you down the wrong path, because they will. And so it's the one bad apple spoils the bunch, I guess, in a way too. That there's here, and it's the first one. It's a proclamation of be aware of who you're hanging out with, who you're around all the time. Because if you were hanging out with the wicked, it's going to influence you. Even if you might know better. But don't be like the first verse, be like the second verse. The teaching of God. That's what you have to make central, right? Not the teachings of the wicked. Because if you do that, Sadi Katamar, right? You are like a tree planted beside streams of water, right? So you're going to be right next to the life-giving, the renewing source, right? You're not going to be away from the life-giving nature of Torah, the resources of Torah. You're going to be right there, close, planted right next to it. So you're going to get all the water, and then you're going to yield good fruit. You're going to be a good person with mitzvot, right? You're going to do good deeds. And your foliage, your beauty is never going to fade. And that you're going to produce good descendants, perhaps. Or it's also looked at as good works, right? That you're going to, the work of your hands is going to be appreciated, and you're going to meet success. And it's going to be a success that is long lasting, as opposed to the wicked, who they might win the day in the beginning, but in the end, they're gone, right? They get blown away into the dust. And then you get a little bit more of the eternality at the end. The wicked will not survive judgment, or sinners will not survive in the assembly of the righteous. That there's going to be some kind of judgment, some kind of recompense for our actions. This is later going to be given more of a afterlife shade to it, about heaven and Gehenna and the whole thing. Probably when it was written, maybe a little less so, if that was in there. But just the idea that there will be some kind of judgment. The Lord, Adonai cherishes the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked, no good. Okay? Simple enough? Good deal. Melissa, do you want to read this one over here?
Sure. Why do nations assemble and peoples plot vain things? Kings of the earth take their stand, and regents intrigue together against the Lord and against his anointed. Let us break the cords of their yoke, shake off their ropes from us. He who is enthroned in heaven laughs, the Lord mocks at them. Then he speaks to them in anger, terrifying them in his rage. But I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. Let me tell you of the decree, the Lord said to me. You are my son. I have fathered you this day. Ask it of me, and I will make the nations your domain, your estate, the limits of the earth. You can smash them with an iron mace, shatter them like potter's ware. So now, O kings, be prudent, accept discipline, you of the earth. Serve the Lord in awe, tremble with fright, pay homage in good faith, lest he be angered, and your way be doomed in the mere flash of his anger. Happy are all who take refuge in him.
Thank you. I also wanted to know, because we're using the website, and I didn't have time this week to cut and paste and change all the masculine language, that we do have the masculine language in here, the lords and the his and the he's, which isn't usually my boat, but we're going to have it this week for convenience. So I had about 4 hours of phone calls today I wasn't expecting. So them's the breaks. But I did want to mention that we have that language, and it's not my favorite either. But anyway, so God plans and you put it, man plans.
Man plans and God laughs.
Thank you. Man plans and God laughs. Thank you. That's the first part of this here, obviously, right? That people come up with their ideas. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But you know what? That's not how it's going to work, according to the psalmist, right? God is going to be have the final word here. And so I like the imagery again of God sort of laughing in heaven. Ha 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 ha. So you think. You might have an idea, it ain't going to work out that way. And then God says, hey, don't you know? Like we have a king in Zion. We have the ruler that I appointed. And don't mess around. And in fact, if you do mess around too much, maybe we'll have this king in Zion come and smack you around a little bit. They're gonna come in and they're gonna break you, with a mace or like. So, so again, so instead of doing that, instead of being trying to usurp God's place, don't do that. Serve God. Serve God with trembling and pay homage. Because if you get on the wrong side of God, it can be over for you like this. That'll be it. You'll be done. Okay. It's an interesting, idea because this one seems a bit messianic. Obviously with the king in Zion and the other nations sort of standing off in awe, and Israel sort of being dominant in this one. Okay, now here's actually a great example. So here's one that is contextualized for us, and it might not literally have been written by David, but here is going to give you again a context for this psalm, which we didn't have in the other two, that were more just loose and unthemed in the greater sense of the context of history. So here we have one that has some historical context. David, when he fled from his son Absalom. So if we remember our biblical history, David is reigning. He's ruling Israel, and there are some palace intrigue, as there always is. King David in his time, there was a lot, well, frankly, before he was King David, he was part of a lot of palace intrigue and a lot of political maneuverings and backstabbings and front stabbings, and really just a lot of stabbing altogether. And there was a part of his rule that was interrupted because his own son basically tried to overthrow him and take the crown. And Absalom sort of puts together a military unit, and David has no interest in fighting his son. David's going to take a powder, and he's going to leave. And so David then has to regroup and come up with a different plan. It's not a happy story, but David does eventually return, obviously. But it's a very interesting narrative. I mean, Book of Samuel, Book of Kings, sort of great narratives, a lot of great history, true or not, but a lot of great retellings, perhaps, of history might be a better way of putting it. And so here we have a Psalm of David when he fled Absalom. So we'll have a sense of what this looks like. Susan, you want to give that a read?
Sure. A Psalm of David when he fled from his son Absalom. O Lord, my foes are so many. Many are those who attack me. Many say of me, there is no deliverance for him through God. Selah. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, he who holds my head high. I cry aloud to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy mountain. Selah. I lie down and sleep and wake again, for the Lord sustains me. I have no fear of the myriad forces arrayed against me on every side. Rise, O Lord, deliver me, O my God, for you slap all my enemies in the face. You break the teeth of the wicked. Deliverance is the Lord's. Your blessing be upon your people. Selah. What is Selah?
Okay, so that's a good place to start, right? And so we have this statement, this affirmation, this word of praise, Selah, and so that's really what it is. And the reason why it's written that way is it's not translatable, right? Like we don't really have a sense of what that word actually means, almost similar to, well, actually, with amen, we have a sense of what it means. Like amen would mean, I believe this, like I affirm this. That's the translation really of amen, is that I agree, I affirm, I avow, the statement to be true. And Selah is sort of similar in that way, where it's an exclamation of piety, right? So when he says a statement here, there is no deliverance for him through God, Selah, that's what they're saying. And that's their sort of vocal affirmation. What I love about a psalm like this is that, again, it's multi-layered, that you have the feelings of the person, right, in its own context, in its own time. We're going to push aside the David part. That's another way of looking at it, of course, that this is something that David would say when he's fleeing. But, we'll get into the mind of the author, right? So what's the author feeling at this moment when he's writing this psalm?
Anxiety?
Say again?
Anxiety?
Anxiety. I think anxiety is definitely there.
But confident that he's going to be protected.
It's that balance, exactly right. There's a balance between fear, right, and hope in this psalm, which I think is beautiful. And it's actually a way that many of these psalms come out, is that there's this balance between faith and fear. That when he's writing this, he's terrified, this person, right? He's very anxious. He's looking around and he's thinking, God, I'm dealing with so much right now. All my foes, either literal enemies or metaphorical, enemies. There's so much on my plate. I'm surrounded on all sides. And who hasn't in their lives sometimes felt overwhelmed and overly burdened and, feeling like the walls are sort of closing in? That's what he's feeling. That everything's just around me. It's becoming too much. But you know what? Even in the moments where I'm despairing, even when I'm fearful, even when I'm feeling that crushing weight of everything sort of coming at me at once, I have faith. I believe that God is with me. God is going to protect me. God is going to shield me from all my sorrows, from all of my troubles. And that when I pray, right, when I cry out to God, God is going to answer me, and that, even when I'm terrified, I'm going to sleep and I'm going to wake up in the morning, so things are bad, but you know what? I'm alive. I'm going to sleep and I'll wake up and God's going to help me, through my day. So I don't have to fear all the different forces. I think it's also a way of him almost giving him a pep talk, giving himself a pep talk, like there's so much around me, but you know what? I can do it. God's going to help me. God's going to, make it all right. What do I have to fear? I have God's deliverance. The myriad forces are arrayed against me, but I'm not going to be afraid. And then in 8, it goes back to the prayer again. God, come help me. Rise. Get up, get off your tuchus is how they basically say it, right? Get up, help me out, deliver me, from the bad stuff. Go and give the bad guys a little one of those, a little smack, 5 across the eyes. Give them a little smack here and break their teeth. Hello. And then he'll be delivered, from what's going on. So it really is. It's an outcry, for help. It's a psalm of, not necessarily lament per se, but it is individuals. They put it in David's mouth, right? Because David is the one fleeing from Absalom and all the enemies that are literally chasing him. It's not the first time he's had to run away, when people are chasing him. But you know what? David in this psalmist's mind is going to have faith in God and God's protection, and that God's going to help him through it. And just in the same way, the author of the psalm believes the same thing, right? That even if he's stressed, if he has problems, if he feels surrounded, that God's going to help. And then that third layer is us. That when we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling the walls are closing in and we're feeling surrounded and overwhelmed, this is a psalm that maybe we would say to make ourselves feel better, give ourselves some faith, some confidence, some reassurance that God is there, God is present, God is listening, and God has the ability to deliver us, to redeem us, to help us from all of our sorrows, from all of our stress. Okay. Linda White, do you want to give us a read?
Sure. For the leader with instrumental music, a psalm of David. Answer me when I call, O God, my vindicator. You freed me from distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. You men, how long will my glory be mocked? Will you love illusions, have recourse to frauds? Salah. Note that the Lord singles out the faithful for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. So tremble and sin no more. Ponder it on your head and sigh. Offer sacrifices in righteousness and trust in the Lord. Many say, oh, for good days, bestow your favor on us, O Lord. You put joy into my heart when their grain and wine shall increase. Safe and sound I lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, keep me secure.
Thank you so much. Another sort of beautiful expression of faith. But you can see, as we mentioned, so here's verse 1. So who is this psalm for? For the prayer leader, for whoever is culling together, getting everyone together for this service, for this sacrificial experience. And there's going to be instruments. This is meant to be played to music. It's meant to be played with harp and with, we've probably used some form of harp or lute, some kind of stringed instrument. And that, again, we don't know how it would be done, but it would be done, that way. And then they would sing. They would play the melody, which is lost to us, obviously. They'd play the tune, and they would sing this psalm. And it's that outcry. It's that crying out, right? Answer me, God. I could use some help, but, God is my salvation, right? God is my vindicator, because God, in the past, you freed me from distress. And so now, also free me from distress. Hear me, hear my prayer. And this is probably something that might have been done as they were bringing up the bull, as they're bringing up the goat or the doves or the grain, whatever they were sacrificing. They'd be bringing this up, and the people around, the person offering the sacrifice and the priests would be singing this. It's almost choral, I think, in a way, where people can be singing this together. And so people are bothering him, people are giving him sorrows, they're giving him grief, but God is going to be of help. God's going to single out the faithful. And God, again, we talked about this idea before, the idea of, we use this expression on the high holidays a lot because it's one of the prayers, that Shema Kolenu, God listens to our voice, the God that hearkens to prayer. That's a very important theological concept, that we have, especially in early Judaism to today, that we need to believe in a God who hears our prayer, because or else we're talking to ourselves. Now there are other interpretations, of course, that you can give to a different solution and a different reasoning of why we pray, but that's the early theological conception, right? God has to hear our prayers, and because then God can act, God can do something in the world, or again, or not, depending on one's theology. So God is going to come to the aid. And so relax on 5, right? Tremble, sin no more, ponder on your bed. So go relax, offer sacrifices in righteousness, trust in God, it'll be good. And you might say, oh, we long for the good old days. We long for things to be their way they were. But okay, so let's offer the sacrifices, let's do the right things. And maybe God will have favor upon us, right? And God will grant us those requests. And just telling God, look, it makes us really happy when things go well, right? You put joy into my heart when grain and wine shall increase. So we'll know that we're doing the right thing when good stuff happens. Very simple, right? When good stuff happens, we'll know we're doing the right thing. From the prophets, we know when bad stuff happens because we're doing bad things. This is the flip, right? Do good and good stuff will happen. It'll be a sign that we're on the right track, that we are, performing the right actions if we have, this increase in our bounty, right? And so we think and we pray and we hope, and then you know what? If we're confident that we're doing the right thing, we can sleep soundly, get on our Tempur-Pedic, pillows, and just close our eyes and have a good schluff and feel really good because we're confident in God keeping us secure.
May I ask, Rabbi, are the priests eating the sacrifices? Because obviously God doesn't.
It depends on the sacrifice. So some of the sacrifices are called olah, where they are completely burned up as offerings. And there are others that are not completely burned up, right? And there are pieces of it that remain for lunch. and for dinner. Okay, priests get hungry too. Levites get hungry too. They gotta eat something, right? Because they're not making a living any other way. This is how they're making a living, and they don't have any land holdings either. So this is nourishment. This is a way for them to get some food as well. If you liked red meat, if you liked, a little bit of bull or a little bit of oxen, I guess, and instead of livestock, you were good to go. Every day, hamburgers.
Yeah.
You get chicken too. You get doves, right? And so, again, the way I always looked at it was like you get the meal offerings in the morning and the afternoon. So you get pancakes, you get your grains, in, because they're cooked on a griddle. So you sort of get your pancakes, and there's a little bit of stuff on it. So you get a little topping. It's not exactly, caramelized apples and whatever, but, you get a little topping on it. It's not dry. Then you have the doves for lunch. You get a little chicken in. It's not exactly Popeyes, but you get, some chicken in. For dinner, you have the ox. You get a big old hunk of leg, a big drumstick from this thing. And you go to town. And lamb too. Don't forget your lamb too. So, you can really eat well. There's no vegetables. That's the problem. There's not a lot of vegetable offerings in this time. You had it for the holidays, for Sukkot, and Simchat Torah, and Sukkot, Shavuot, Pesach. You had more sort of vegetable tithes as well. So you can have, some of your fruit and veg then. But the main courses, there was a lot of meat.
Thanks.
Yeah, a lot of meat. I always thought it was like ye old barbecue. You sort of like walk by some of these like smokehouses and you smell that air, and that's what it was like. I feel like maybe less mesquite.
Now, are the people eating their own lambs and oxen and stuff?
Those who could afford it. You remember the issue was that if you're raising these animals, you usually want to keep them for for the wool, for the milk, for the whatever it is, and some of them were for eating, but you also wanted to be able to sell. You wanted to sell what they were producing.
Okay.
And so if it got to the point where they weren't doing much else, then maybe they could be on the menu. But I think it would depend on the family and their finances, what they can do with it. Because you have to remember, sacrificial system, this was a dent in the old wallet. Because you had to offer good stuff. You couldn't offer your lame, broken, blind animals. You had to offer the ones that were tamim. They were whole, or they didn't have any blemish on them. So you had to give your best. And that was a hit. That was a financial expense, because if you had to donate or offer up, these oxen, those cost a lot of money. And that was not something everyone had, which is why you also have the other animals that get sacrificed as well, because not everyone can afford to spare an oxen. A group of oxen. So I don't know. Put a little barbecue sauce on it. I'm sure it was fine. But,
Ketchup.
Yeah. No ketchup. No ketchup on the well done steaks. But I imagine it really being like I think about it and I wonder for myself sometimes, like, where would I be in this ceremony? I feel like I'd be towards the back. Like I would have very little stomach for, all the sort of the blood and the gore and the machinations of this whole thing. I wouldn't be in the choir because I can't sing, but I'd sort of maybe in the back somewhere, like, hey, you do that, I'm not watching this because it's a little gruesome.
You grow up with it, so you're used to it.
Say again?
You grow up with it, so you're used to it.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It's a different kind of lifestyle. It's 100%. It's like when you're used to seeing all this stuff, it doesn't bother you in the same way. But I just imagine it being really, on one hand, like, it would be, to me, just obviously so fascinating to like teleport back 3,000 years ago and sort of like see what this actually looked like from an anthropological perspective and from a religion, sociological, and spiritual stuff. I'd love to see what it looked like. Was it literally just like Mardi Gras? Was it, barbecue? Was it more solemn? Was it more raucous? Like, what did it actually look like? Because you picture them leading up these animals while these psalms are being sung and there are people sort of dancing and there's a lot going. I feel like it would be very sensory overload. There'd be a lot of stuff going on. And because I think that was also part of it, is that people had to want to come, right? I mean, they had to want to be there, or else they'd stay home, and not do it. So you had to create something for them that was engaging, just like today, right? You have to create something that's engaging and interesting. So I really am fascinated by it, and the Psalms, again, to give us some insight in the fact that these words were said and sung during the time of sacrifice, though some, of course, much later. But yeah, it's just one wonders what that would be like. Not that I'm
Thank
calling
you.
for it anyway, but okay. Who are we up to? Leah, did you just read, or you haven't read?
No, I just read.
Okay, so thank you. Leah, you want to give us a read over here?
Sure. For the leader on Nehiloth, a psalm of David. Give ear to my speech, O Lord. Consider my utterance. Heed the sound of my cry, my King and God, for I pray to you. Hear my voice, O Lord, at daybreak. At daybreak I plead before you and wait. For you are not a God who desires wickedness. Evil cannot abide with you. Wanton men cannot endure in your sight. You detest all evildoers. You doom those who speak lies, murderous, deceitful men, the Lord abhors. But I, through your abundant love, enter your house. I bow down in awe at your holy temple. O Lord, lead me along your righteous path because of my watchful foes. Make your way straight before me. For there is no sincerity on their lips. Their heart is filled with malice. Their throat is an open grave, their tongue slippery. Condemn them, O God. Let them fall by their own devices. Cast them out for their many crimes, for they defy you. But let all who take refuge in you rejoice, ever jubilant as you shelter them, and let those who love your name exult in you. For you surely bless the righteous man, O Lord, encompassing him with favor like a shield.
No, very nice. Thank you for that one. Let me into the temple. I'm outside waiting. I don't have the key. Okay, so for the leader, again, the one who would be conducting these psalms, we're going to conduct them with Nehiloth, Nehilot. It's going to be a woodwind. It's going to be a flute, most likely. Okay, so the other one we're going to use a harp or a lyre or a lute, and here we're going to use a woodwind. We're going to use a flute for this one. Not every song can be played on every instrument, right? I guess so. This one sounds better with the flute. And so Ha'azinu, so like God, listen to my speech. Listen to what I'm saying. It's again that sort of anthropomorphic, language in a way that you really want God to be like, yes, listen up, what's going on. Heed the sound of my cry. Again, it's poetic language, so you're gonna get a lot of parallelism in the language. So the 2 and 3 mean the same thing, right? Give ear to my speech, heed the sound of my cry, consider my utterance, and I pray to you, so it's the same thing just twice. And then we get it again, hear my voice, because I need you to listen. I need you to know what's going on. And because you don't desire wickedness, let's learn how to be good. You detest all evildoers. You get the sense he was a little under a little surus, right, as well, that there's a lot of bad things going on, or some people who might be giving him grief. And so he's saying, God, you hate all these people who are doing all this terrible stuff, and you've taught us how to live the right way, that we can't speak lies. It's written in the negative. You doom those who speak lies, who are murderous, deceitful. Verse 8. A bottle of Manischewitz. If anyone can tell me where verse 8 is from, or where verse 8 is used.
What are you asking?
Yeah.
Verse 8 is actually used in the prayer service.
Oh.
Oh, hear my prayer.
At least I think so. I'll have to double check now that I said it, but, I'm pretty sure.
Where are you referring to?
Here, but I, through your abundant love, enter your house. I bow down in awe at your holy temple.
And your question is?
Where is that found in the liturgy?
Oh,
Unless I'm wrong, which I could be true too.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Not having the Hebrew in front of me.
It's okay.
And so I'm 99% sure, I'm going to give it a quick little check, that that's actually from Matovu.
mm,
And that a lot of our prayers, as we've mentioned, come from words of Psalms. And so I think this is an example. What is this, 5:8? Let's see. Yep. Never doubted it. Yep. that is in fact. So when the people were composing this prayer, this Matovu prayer, that opens up our Saturday morning Shabbat services, usually, where would they go? Where would they look for inspiration? They look for inspiration from the Psalms. So they would take this verse and pluck it out, because the verse before it and the verse after it are not in Matovu. They just took this verse. They like this one. They plucked it out and made it part of the prayer. V'ani berov chazdecha al vovetecha eshtachave el hechal kodshecha be'iratecha. And so that is, but I, through your abundant love, enter your house. I bow down in awe at your holy temple. So Matovu, which we read in the beginning of the prayer service when we sing it, that's what we're doing, right? In love, we're entering the temple, we're entering the synagogue, we're here, right? And so that's why it's a great prayer. Everyone okay there?
COVID?
Yeah, we okay? Holy mackerel. Okay, hope you stay well, everybody.
mhm.
Rabbi, do you not feel that some of this is like either my way or the highway?
With God in general?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that in terms of the eyes of the Psalter, the psalmist, but also in other parts of the Bible as well. Yeah, I mean, God sets down. See, where I think I would reframe in a way is that we agreed to it. Like we made a deal, made an arrangement, right? God says, this is the covenant, and we have at Sinai, at least purportedly at Sinai, a choice. We can say yay or we can say nay, but we say that we're going to do it. Na'aseh v'nishma, we will listen, we're going to do it. And then God wants to hold us to our part of the deal that we've made. And I think that's where it becomes tricky, right? Is that God sets the terms, we agree to the terms, right? But then if we're like, we want to change the terms, that becomes a problem. Like if we want to sort of say, maybe not this anymore, we don't like this part. We can't really change it in the eyes of the biblical narrative, right? And the eyes of the poem. So that we have the path, or we have the right way of living. And if we don't do it, that's the my way, the highway part, right? That's when it comes, bam, that becomes the problem later. Where if you don't do it, you're going to get the divine zets, the klap on the kof, as my teacher once said.
So did God realize what he was doing to us as a people?
I think God has high expectations. And that's how I like to frame it. I think that God recognizes that we are human and have obviously the capacity for error, but we also have the capacity for teshuva, for atonement. But yeah, we have a high standard. I mean, it doesn't get much higher, right? In Leviticus, right, where it says, "You shall be holy, for I, your God, am holy." And so we are basically commanded to be like God. So the standard is pretty darn high, and I like to think that God admires our struggle. So that as long as we're sort of struggling, as long as we're sort of striving for the good, I think that's what God wants from us. I don't think God expects perfection from us, but that we give it our best faith effort each time. And when we are behaving badly, that's when God is less amused. When we're not trying our best, and when we're very purposely sort of subverting, the things that we know to be true, or that we know to be right, or to be good, however you want to define it, right? but God defines it through Torah, right? Through covenant, and through what we have. But yeah, a little my way or the highway. It can certainly have that feel. I don't doubt it. And I think the comparison is interesting to me, right? In these Psalms, we've read a couple that have similar theme, that like, help me because I'm doing the right thing, and those people who aren't doing the right thing, go get them. You know, go give them a little bit of a smack. You know, so let me into the temple. I want to do the right thing. Those other bums, those other crumb bums, you got to go teach them a lesson, but not me. I'm trying to do the right thing. Because this is some descriptive stuff. I mean, like the prophets, we had this too, but this is some descriptive stuff. There's no sincerity on their lips. Their heart is filled with malice. Their throat is an open grave. I mean, yikes. That is some imagery. Their tongue slippery from deceit and all that other good stuff. And so give them a zets, punish them, or, which I like here, by the way, is punish them, but also a little parenting theory, some natural consequences. Let them fall by their own devices. If they're going to scheme and do bad things, let it turn out bad for them. And let all who are doing the right things take comfort. But this is, I think, again, a beautiful image at the end. You'll surely bless the righteous person, encompassing them, with favor, like a shield. The idea of God being our protection. We have that during a funeral service, in particular. But there are other times I'm thinking about it. But we read, Psalm is it, like 92? So one of the in the 90s, the Psalm that speaks, Shiviti Adonai Lidnegdi Tamid. So return to me, to protect me. But that idea of God being at our side, and God is at my side, I shall not be moved. God is a shield. God is protecting us, right? And that idea that God has that power. And for a people who, when this was likely written, I'm guessing, when this was to be written, we're going through some tough times, right? They were going through some different surahs, because, our people have gone through our surahs for many generations, so it's not out of the realm of possibility this is being written in a time of turmoil. But, looking for divine protection, looking for the safety, right? Because where do you find safety in a time of strife? Where do you find sanctuary, right? Quite literally, they're looking for sanctuary in the literal context, let me into your house, but I think it's more metaphorical, let me into your good graces, make sure that I'm there among the people who are being protected, because that's where I want to take refuge, because where else can one take refuge in times of turmoil, when things are burning all around you? You want to have faith that God will protect you from all that is going wrong. Okay, Tony, you want to read this one over here? I'm going to scroll down. For the leader with instrumental music.
For the leader with instrumental music on the Sheminith, a Psalm of David. O Lord, do not punish me in anger. Do not chase me in fury. Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I languish. Heal me, O Lord, for my bones shake with terror. My whole being is stricken with terror. Why you, Lord, oh, how long? O Lord, turn, rescue me, deliver me, and befits your faithfulness. For there is no praise of you among the dead. In Sheol, who can acclaim you? I am weary with groaning every night. I drench my bed. I melt my couch in tears. My eyes are wasted on vexation, worn out because of all foes. Away from me, all you evildoers, for the Lord heeds the sound of my weeping. The Lord heeds my plea. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be frustrated and stricken with terror. They will turn back in an instant frustrated.
Thank you.
Whoa.
A little bit of a downer in terms of the actual psalm itself. This is one more jubilant psalms. We mentioned a little earlier on about sometimes the musical terms, some of the terminology is hard to translate because it's just, we don't really know what it meant at the, now. Back then they knew. So we have, for the leader with instrumental music on the sheminin, which likely means it's a musical term probably for the 8th octave. This was going to be sung high, right? This is going to be more of a high-pitched, probably rendition of this psalm when it was sung. That is going to have, again, some instrumental music, probably some strings, and it was going to be played, again, in a higher pitch, a higher range than others, which we might think about as an interesting mix of performance and words, that this is a plea, right? This is a plea of terror, right? A plea of fear. And when we're scared, sometimes our voice rises, right? And we speak at higher pitch, in a shriek, in that kind of a way. And so here, this is a psalm spoken in fear, right? And in lament. And again, the imagery is it's a little hard, but the imagery is still very vivid, right? That my bones shake, with terror. He's calling for healing. This is a not so flowery Misha Berach, right? This is a prayer for healing in a way. Heal me because I'm frightened. I'm terrified. I am anxious. I'm afraid. And again, very descriptive. My bones shake. I'm stricken. My whole body's stricken with terror. How long, right? Do I have to suffer with this? Rescue me, deliver me, because if I'm gone, if I've passed away, how can I praise you? If you want praise, send me a little bit of comfort, send me a little bit of salvation, and I'll be able to pray, because the dead can't pray. And just the exhaustion of it, I love the vividness of the emotion, because again, I can say how many people from, have felt this way in thousands and thousands of years, when they've had moments in their lives where they're scared, they're sick, they're weak, they're overwhelmed. There's so much going on that could make us, put us into a frenzy. And 3,000 years ago, this guy was feeling the exact same thing, feeling scared, feeling hopeless, feeling helpless, just literally crying the days and nights away. But he has faith, in verse 10 and 11, it's almost like that wishful thinking, that if you want it bad enough, it'll come true. That, please God, hear my plea, accept my prayer, because that's what God does, right? God is supposed to hear our prayers and accept our crying out, in love, and that everything that's going wrong in his life will be better. And that it will be the other people, so to speak, literally here, taking it, the other people are going to be stricken with terror. They'll be frustrated, and I'll be okay again. But I think about Morgan, the metaphor of it being about just his circumstances, the surroundings that he is experiencing, that it's too much for him, and he wants it to be better. And so it really is a great example of an individual lament. We're going to see communal laments, as well as we go through the Psalms. There's 150 Psalms. So I don't know if we're going to read all of them, certainly, but we're going to get a taste. We're going to take a little bit of a bissel, of the Psalms for a little while. Because again, they are sort of beautiful, I think, in their language. And I think the vividness, the imagery, the emotion, taking a look at, and also sort of connecting to how these different emotions can even play out today. But that's my intro on Tehillim, on Psalms. We're gonna again take that 30-second stretch, and then we'll jump into liturgy. We're gonna begin with Friday night liturgy today, and go through the development of the meaning of our Friday night service. So we're gonna begin with Kabbalat Shabbat, basically the way we introduce our Shabbat evening service. So we're just going to stop the share here for a moment and say hi to everybody once again. And there's some other people just popped on, so we say hello.
Okay, I have two comments. One is your hair is all gone. You got a haircut.
Yes.
And the other, I tried to get into the service, the community service, and
Yeah.
I never.
It was a problem we had.
Yeah.
It's like you do something the same way over and over and over again, and it works, and then one day you do it the same way, and it don't work. And so we had a lot of fun, unfortunately, on Sunday night, trying to get that to work. And we wound up just going to Facebook, on it after we tried for like 25 minutes to get it to work. We brought in our tech people. They couldn't figure it out. It seems to have been a problem with Google and YouTube syncing that night. And so it's because our Zoom worked when it came to going to Facebook, right? We just went to Facebook and it worked right away. But we could not get to YouTube, which is where we told everyone to go. So we're going to investigate that this week because I don't want on Friday night just not to be able to go to YouTube, because that's what we always do is to go to YouTube, which is why I know it works because we do it all the time. So but as someone remarked to me, like, Rabbi, the first time in 3.5 months we had a tech problem. So, we consider ourselves lucky. It's amazing that we've gone that long without a disaster like that happening. And so we put it on Facebook. It has like 600 views. Pete actually, through his great wisdom, Pete Tanner, he uploaded it from Facebook. He cut off the first 6 minutes of it, which is basically me frantically trying to text people and get the word out. God bless him. So it's not going to be on Facebook. It'll remain as it is. But now we have at least the YouTube version uploaded, which looks less horrifying.
Yes, it popped up. I just saw it like an hour ago, and I saw the beginning of it.
I have a Psalms question. Are these Psalms numbered as they really appear? Like number 1 is number 1 in the book of Psalms, and 2 is number 2?
Yeah.
Okay, this isn't just an outline of yours.
No. This is how it's done.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So so that was some Mishigaso on Sunday. So we'll figure it out. And it was so hard too because I really enjoyed, or I would have enjoyed the experience more if I didn't have to feel like I was freaking out the entire time, not getting the connections. I feel a little bit robbed of that experience. It was still nice. We got a lot of good feedback from it, but I just felt so not in the moment. We talked about last week a little bit about Kavanah and about intention and mindset, and my mindset was not there last week.
I did try 2 or 3 times, and I just got very frustrated and gave up.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I don't know how I got in, but I finally found a way of getting in.
Well, what happened was that Angela had finally gotten through to her, and she did a group text to everyone to tell them where we're supposed to go, and so that was helpful. But it was just we're with 4 other synagogues and churches, right? So they had to get the information to their people. It was just, again, thank God in the end we were able to sort of have it, and it's there and it's fine. But I was less than a happy camper. Experience. I don't get frustrated easily, but that was a little bit.
I figured that part, but I as a user, I couldn't get in, and I just didn't have the patience to keep trying and trying.
No, I understand that. I mean, that's very valid. I mean,
very nice.
What?
Everybody spoke really nice.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Everybody said.
Everyone did a very nice job. I think that's what I'm saying. I didn't feel.
I missed the first one. What was it, Sister Catherine?
Yeah, Sister Catherine, yeah.
I had missed it, but Ellen had put it on Facebook. So I finally got to hear what she had said.
Yeah, so that's what we had, all on Facebook. So God willing, that'll be our last tech error for a little while. Because we got other fish to fry, so to speak. And I don't need tech errors tripping us up. No. I got a call.
May I ask you a question? I have a Christian friend who I guess, a grandchild is being named Shiloh, and she wanted to know what is the Hebrew translation of that word.
I usually have it like it's not shalom per se, but it does have that sense of peace. I'll double check it. I'll double check it for you. But that's always been sort of my interpretation, that it's sort of a soft peace kind of thing, like very tender, a tender kind of peace. But I'll double check.
Thank you.
As well. I got my big book of names somewhere around here, so I can do that. I just want to get myself ready here. We have a couple things to look at today. I'm going to bounce between different screen shares today. So, as I mentioned, we're going to begin today with Kabbalat Shabbat. So our dive into the liturgy has actually reached a point where we're going to be looking at said liturgy as opposed to talking about the development of prayer. We're actually going to look at some prayer and see how it goes. And I thought it would be fitting to begin at the beginning, sort of to begin where our Friday night prayer service starts with Kabbalat Shabbat. Kabbalat Shabbat to me is one of my favorites. And oh, a lot of static.
Didn't hear what you said.
And so it's, to me, really beautiful. We were just obviously studying the Psalms, and a lot of Kabbalat Shabbat does come from the Psalms, but it didn't happen all at once. This is actually almost a 2,000-year creation of what we call a Kabbalat Shabbat, service, because it itself can stand on its own sort of like a rubric, so to speak, its own sort of paradigm, but we use it to introduce our regular Shabbat service. One of the things that's so cool about Kabbalat Shabbat is that you have the ancient Psalms, right? You have material, according to tradition, you have material to study, which we're going to get to, in a moment. We have acrostics. We have, medieval and Kabbalistic mysticism involved, and there's all these other things that group themselves, and we frame it into Kabbalat Shabbat, this service to welcome Shabbat. Kabbalat literally means receive, and so it's how we receive, it's how we welcome Shabbat. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, which I know we're familiar with, but I always like to mention it. And we're going to look at this as our introduction to Kabbalat Shabbat, and then we'll actually look at, time willing, some of the prayers themselves. So I'll probably share Mishkan Tefillah, because I have that online as well. Kabbalat Shabbat. So the actual structure, right, of Kabbalat Shabbat is that we have 6 Psalms, 95 through 99, which are known as the Kingship Psalms, and 29. So those are the 6 that we have. Lechuna Ranana, Shir Chadash, some of these that we sing on Friday nights as part of our service. These are part of the Kingship Psalms. We have a poem that is not in our prayer book, that is not in our liturgy, that is part of Kabbalat Shabbat. It's in the Orthodox, Sidurim, but not in Mishkan Tefillah, called Ana B'Koach. We have another poem, Lecha Dodi, that one we know. And one of the reasons why I think Kabbalat Shabbat is so special is because it contains Lecha Dodi. And for many of us, it's a very evocative, very important prayer to welcome Shabbat. 2 more Psalms follow Lecha Dodi, 92 and 93. And then traditionally we have a Chatzi Kaddish. And then there is a passage of Mishnah, a passage of oral Torah, B'ma Madlikin, which is read as well, also, not surprisingly, not in the Reform Sidur, for reasons that we'll see. Then followed by another Chatzi Kaddish. We have one of the Chatzi Kaddishes remain, so when we do all these opening prayers, right, we have a Chatzi Kaddish, and then we do Baruch Hu. So Chatzi Kaddish, Yikadav, Yikadash, like these Chatzi Kaddish, they can serve almost as bookmarks. Another way of looking at them is they can serve as semicolons or periods. It's a sign that we're stopping one part of the service and moving on to another part of the service. And so in this case, we have Chatzi Kaddish, and we say, okay, we've done that. That's our ending of Kabbalat Shabbat. And now we're going to go into the main part of the service, the Shema Ubirchotecha, the Shema and its blessings. And so we'll have Baruch Hu to introduce, and then we'll have our next rubric of prayers, our next set of prayers come in after Chatzi Kaddish. Okay, so that is our structure. That's how it's laid out. The development is fascinating. There are a couple of different P words to use here. Politics, and piety. Because when it comes to the structure of Kabbalat Shabbat and the development, both play a pretty significant role. The politics of the time and the devotion, the piety of the people who were creating these different prayers. So first we're going to start with piety in a way, but there's some politics in here as well. So one of the last parts of Kabbalat Shabbat are these two Psalms, 92 and 93. It's actually the first thing that we had probably for Kabbalat Shabbat, were those two Psalms, 92 and 93, and then Chatzi Kaddish. These were developed as part of the prayer service in what was then Palestine, the Palestinian Jewish tradition. And we have, of course, the Chatzi Kaddish, which comes as part of it. We had mentioned, I think last week, maybe the week before, that the Palestinian Jewish community was sort of behind the curve because they did not have prayer. The Babylonian community had a 500-year head start because they had no temple. So they were in Babylonia, whereas in Judea and then Palestine, you had a temple that was there. So they're still offering sacrifices and doing the Psalms. So these two Psalms, 92 and 93, were said, we can guess, during that time period. And that, as we had mentioned, surprisingly, perhaps, there was tension between Jewish communities that, different denominations, shockingly, didn't always get along. And so there was this Palestinian...
Never heard of anything like that.
Never heard of it. Chas v'chalila. God forbid such a thing should be said, that there's disagreement ever. And so they created their own thing. They didn't want to be bossed around by their buddies across the way. They wanted to create their own thing, and part of this was songs and poems, beautiful stuff. Gets created, in that area, obviously. And so part of it was, they wanted to keep the Psalms. They loved the Psalms. They were enamored with them, and so the Psalms being the earliest form, again, as we mentioned this, a few minutes ago in class, the earliest form of prayer, right? The earliest form of sort of sung devotionals. Of course, they'd want to keep them and use them for their liturgy, their prayer later. So we have Psalm 92. Hey, wouldn't you know it? It's even titled the Psalm for the Sabbath Day. Perfect, easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right in there. It's excellent to do it. To have the Psalm for the Sabbath Day involved in our Sabbath liturgy. Psalm 93, a little more unclear why it's there, but it's nice. It's good, nice Psalm. And it's right next to 92, easy to find. It talks about, creation and again, a little bit more about sovereignty, redemption, all that good stuff. Makes sense to use it. And the Levites, those vocal maestros, were singing it anyway, and so they kept it. And it appeared early on Friday night and Saturday morning. Now they're both on Friday night. And as I mentioned, the Psalms, not at that point in terms of Kabbalat Shabbat, but as we know, the Psalms make up a big core of our liturgy. Little pieces of it are excerpted and put into different parts of our prayer service, and some are a little bit bigger. Like, for example, the thing that comes to mind for me is on Saturday morning in Mishkan Tefillah, Psalm 150, is there as a psalm that it's there intact. The entire psalm, we just sort of sing it. And other parts of the prayer service, like Hine Matov, Matovu, Mi Chamocha, other parts of our service, there are parts of them that are taken directly from the Tehillim, from the Psalms. So we inherited these two Psalms, and they remain with us today. Now we take a little break, a couple hundred years, for our next little piece. Bema Madlikin, our Mishnaic passage. I love this story so much. It just tickles me. And I hope it tickles you as well. Because again, it just shows once in a while the Jewish community. That's why I have my rocky background up, one of the many reasons. Can be a little feisty, can be a little argumentative with each other. So again, surprise, surprise, there was a difference in interpretation about Exodus 35:3, which says, "You shall kindle no fire throughout your habitation on the Sabbath day." What does that mean, right? And so it can be read as, do we have to extinguish all of our fires the night before Shabbat arrives? Or do we avoid kindling new lights on Shabbat? We can guess where this went, by the way, just from today, right?
The Karaites still believe that.
Bingo, you didn't even see my notes. I haven't scrolled down that far yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's perfect. You got it exactly right. That's where we're heading. To our friends, the Karaites. So, but before we get to the Karaites, we have their ideological predecessors, who were the Sadducees. So going back, we spoke, I think maybe it was 2 weeks ago, right, that we had the different sects of the Jewish community during this time, where you had to break down 5, 6 different groups of people. You had the Pharisees, who are going to be eventually the rabbis. You have the Sadducees, who were the priests, the priestly class. You had the Essenes out in the wilderness waiting for apocalypse to come. You had the Zealots who were going around stabbing people. That seemed to be what they liked to do on an evening night, is to go and stab a couple Roman soldiers. That's sort of what they did. And then you had, of course, that big category of what they call today the JJs, the just Jews. They were just sort of around, trying to live their life without being part of any of this mishigas. So the Sadducees, because they were in the temple, they had no use really for oral Torah and rabbinic Judaism in the same way. They wanted things to go on as it was happening already. They wanted the sacrifices. They didn't want to hear from prayer or different rituals. Sacrifices is what they liked. They were literalists and said, on Shabbat, we can't have any light. There's no fire, right? So Friday night to Saturday night, we're in darkness. No lights at all. The Pharisees said that's mishigas, that the written Torah has to be supplemented with oral Torah, which, surprise, surprise, we wrote. So, makes sense that we want it to be used. Politics always comes into play. They wanted to use it. It's what they believed. And it helped to them flesh out the Torah, right? I use that example about, it says don't work on Shabbat, right? So what does it mean not to work on Shabbat? The Mishnah tells us, the oral Torah, 39 categories of work that can't be done on Shabbat, as opposed to saying don't work. So in the same way, the Pharisees looked at oral Torah to flesh out, this commandment, and they thought to themselves, you know what? God doesn't want us sitting in the dark. What sense does that make? What kind of deity wants us to be sitting alone in the dark all night and all day? We call Shabbat oneg. We call Shabbat a delight. How can it be delightful if we can't see our hand in front of our face? So let's have some light. Light also means joy, right, in different contexts. So let's light the candles and then start Shabbat. And so we won't kindle any lights after Shabbat starts. So instead of leaving it like that, the rabbis, oh, I love those rabbis, they said that instead of just saying you have permission to kindle lights on Shabbat, make it a rule that you have to light candles on Shabbat. That becomes the rule. And they codify this in the Mishnah, which then gets, once again, codified again later on, as we're going to fast forward, as Gary has told us, to our friends the Karaites, right? So we go to our 8th and 9th century. We're out of the Palestinian tradition now. We're in the Babylonian tradition. So the rabbis there are the big boss, right? They have the politics behind them. They're running the show. They want sole authority over interpretation. Surprise, surprise, don't we all? So they want to be the ones laying down the law, laying down the rules. And the Karaites say, not so much. We don't care what you have to say, because we don't believe in oral Torah. That's a fraud. God gave us the Torah. It's a hoax. God gave us the Torah, right? And that's all we need. We don't need the rabbis telling us how to interpret the Torah. We can do it for ourselves. So we're not going to light candles, because in the Torah it says, don't light candles. It didn't, say to do it. So no, it's a very literal interpretation. So the Geonim, of course, decided, you know what? It's a mitzvah. And not only is it a mitzvah to do it on Shabbat, to remind you that you have to do it on Shabbat, we're going to put it in the prayer book. So every week you're going to read about how to light Shabbat candles. So they throw in this painfully boring section of the Mishnah into the Friday night liturgy, which obviously the Reformed rabbis took their scissors and cut that out. I'm not reading that every week because it's not interesting. You know, it's a study piece to be sure, but it's not exactly getting them swaying and moving in the aisles to read this portion of the Mishnah, which I actually have for you a little bit more in a second. But particularly the sixth part of this Mishnah, which is, again, it's in the Orthodox prayer book. You know, so if you wanted to grab one, if you have it, you'll find it there. And it says that women die in childbirth for failing to light Shabbat candles. Not exactly an upper, right? And it is something that they're using now as a threat, as a cudgel, as a stick of divine retribution and divine punishment for those who don't light candles. So we move to a discussion of, do we light or not light, to not only do you light, but if you don't, there's going to be massive theological consequences if you don't light candles on Shabbat. Now, study, of course, not to bash the Mishnah too much, but study, of course, is seen as an important element of prayer, right? And so study for us is a mitzvah. So to have it isn't completely out of bounds. But I'm just saying that the passage even of itself doesn't really ring true from a Reformed perspective in terms of our theology. And again, quite frankly, it's not that interesting to read. So I actually gave you a little bit of this just to prove my point. Karen, you want to read a little bit of this?
Before we do that, can I ask a question about,
Yeah.
So when you talk about the candles, lighting the candles, the Pharisees' view, I mean, in a way that sounds like, are we lighting candles because they give light? Is that why we light them? Because they're giving light and that we just take care of it before we start Shabbat?
I think in the very early conception of this, right, in the very early conception, there was a thought of the practicality of having light. I would argue they would say it's not why we're doing it, but I think they understood a practicality element, that it would be good to have light so we can sort of see each other, so we can better worship, on Shabbat, and that we can sort of be in a better sense of community. We can read, we can eat, by candlelight, though the candles can't be used to cook, but it's like today, right? It's like having the self timers on the Instapots that you can do in an Orthodox, setting. You can preset your AC, you can preset other things. As long as you're actively touching it, then you can. It's a way to get around it a little bit. It's a way to add some convenience. If you set your Instapot Friday at 4 to be on or to be hot, through your crock pots, your how are you going to make your cholent? Keep your cholent hot. You have to have the fire that you set at Friday at 4 o'clock over your pot, over your cauldron, and now you just leave your stove on.
Does it represent anything else, the candles?
No, of course, but I'm saying it comes later.
Because I don't know what they represent.
So the candles represent God, the first act of creation. Let there be light, and there was light, and God said it was good. And then Shamor v'Zachor, what we have in Makadodi, which we'll get to, observe and remember. So it's 2, in terms of the commandments and of Shabbat. That's why you have 2 candles. But that's sort of later interpretation. But about creation is really the, we have gotten to the background of the candle lighting per se, aside from this passage, but that's going to be in another week. But yeah, creation is going to be the easy answer to it.
Thank you.
Sure. Karen, want to go ahead with what may they kindle?
Okay, with what may they kindle the Shabbat light, and with what may they not kindle them? They may not kindle with cedar fiber, uncarded flax, a raw silk, or tallow.
There were like 15 other things. I just cut it out for time.
Yes, I figured the dots are something.
Yeah.
Nahum the Med says they may kindle with melted tallow. Except
why not? Nahum the Med says melted tallow will be fine. But again, not really applicable to our lives today. Karen, you want to keep going?
Okay. They may not kindle the Shabbat light with teruma oil, which must be burnt on festivals, but the sages permit with all oil, with sesame oil, nut oil, radish oil, never heard of that one, fish oil, gourd oil. Rabbi Tarfon says they don't light with anything but olive oil.
Just olive oil. So don't
I
you
don't know
feel,
how you get oil out of a radish. That'd be really tough.
no, but don't you feel so inspired for Shabbat worship when you read these? Go ahead, go on 5.
Am I reading that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, one who extinguishes the lamp because he is afraid of non-Jews, robbers, or an evil spirit, or so that a sick person may sleep, he is exempt. If he does so because he wants to spare the lamp, the oil, or the wick, he is liable.
Yeah, so the idea being that it's if you wanted to light candles on Shabbat, but you were worried that if you have lights on in your house, maybe it's going to attract robbers, evil spirits, or that you're keeping somebody awake. Again, I like it. Like that part I actually like in terms of just the sentiment, at least. The idea that the ritual is important, but so is the person, right? You know, the individual safety, someone who might sleep. So you have your candles, and you know what? If you lit the candles, said the blessing, did your thing, and then you just blow them out, it's actually okay if you're doing it for the right reason. If you're doing so because you're cheap and you don't want to waste the candle or the oil and whatever it is, that's not right. You can't do it for that reason. You can
This
do
is
it
like
for
not fasting on Yom Kippur if it'll make you sick.
yeah, exactly. Same kind of idea.
Yeah.
And of course, this last one, Karen.
For 3 sins, women die in childbirth because they are not observant of the laws of Midah, Halal, and the kindling of the Shabbat light.
Okay.
Die.
Yeah, very pleasant, right? To have. So the laws of family purity, the laws of nidah, challah, in terms of making it and separating out a portion, and tithing, all that other good stuff, and of course the kindling of Shabbat lights, the big 3. And so, again, one can sort of get the sense from looking at this, I hope, why the Reform movement said, you know what, not so much. We don't have to read this every Friday night.
Obviously written by a man.
Oh, yeah.
So is the one that you're supposed to, the man says every morning, thank God I'm not a woman, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's one of my favorite blessings only because to watch an Orthodox person try to spin their way out of it is funny to me. I enjoy it a little bit on that exercise.
Shelo Asani Isha.
Yeah, Shelo Shani Isha. And from them to try to spin their way out of it, it's just, I always say just own it. Like it is what it is. There's only so much you can do with it. If you're going to say it, I know you need to find a way to make yourself feel better, but let's be intellectually honest with each other that, because they come to me like, well, it's actually, it's in praise of women. When we say Sani Isha, because, and I'm like, how is that possibly in praise of women? Because it's so good, because they don't have to do all this other stuff and whatever it is. But that's not what the prayer says, at all. And of course, then what's the next line after that?
Okay, I need to remember. Thank God I'm a man.
No, you say you have it's framed in negative. Shelo Asani Isha. Thank you God for not making me a woman. And they want to spin that in praise of women. That that they're more ritually and spiritually pure. Which it's impossible to me to spin it that way, just from the way that verse sounds. But even if you were going to pretend, right, that's what it was saying, right? The next verse is Shelo Asani Eved, who did not make me a slave. So then you say, oh, it must have been so great to be a slave. It's the same line, And then it says Shelo Asani Goy, who didn't make me a Gentile. Right. Right? And so you can't say, well, Shelo Asani Isha is in praise of women, because the next 2 lines are Shelo Asani that didn't make me a slave and didn't make me a Gentile. It's just not intellectually defensible. And look, that's what Midrash is for. I understand it. It's not, that's what we do. But it tickles me sometimes that they can't get rid of it. It's really good. Toss it. It wouldn't be the first thing we tossed. Won't be the last thing we toss. But that's not the way they're doing things. But that's jumping ahead to Saturday morning services. We still got to get our way through Kabbalat Shabbat.
What is Nida, Rabbi?
Family purity laws, menstruation, basically.
Oh,
what's challah?
Challah is the when you make the challah itself, you have to separate a portion of it out for charity and for other and burn it up. It's a symbolic act. And so, yeah, those are the big three. Okay, so that takes us to from 5th century Palestine to 8th, 9th century Babylonia, and then we're going to go now back to Palestine to the 16th century Palestine via Spain, via the Kabbalistic movement that was in Spain and then came out. And they made their home up north in Sfat, beautiful, mystic Sfat. Oh, I miss it. It's one of my favorite places in Israel. I love it there so much. And so they were there. Now the mystics, of course, were fascinating individuals and created some really wonderful liturgy for us. But they themselves loved the Psalms. Loved the Psalms. Why not? Poetic, musical, imagery. What's not to like? So the Kabbalists ate it up with a spoon. When they were exiled with the rest of the Jewish community in 1492, as Columbus sailed the ocean blue, the Jews were kicked out as well. And so they went from Spain up to Israel, up to again, was then Palestine. And their lives were shattered. Their lives were broken. And so a fundamental theme of Kabbalah, of mysticism, is reunification. It's where we get Tikkun Olam from. It's actually a mystic expression, that we have to repair the world. They meant it in a more theological standpoint, as opposed to social action, which was how we define it more now. But their whole message was we have to come together. We have to bring different pieces together. And if we're in exile, we're far away from God. So we have to come back to God, return to God. Let's bring together what's been torn apart. And so when you think about these 6 Psalms, is that you have to almost think about the metaphor of 2 lovers who are searching for each other and they can't find each other. But then on Shabbat, they do. The Chad Dodi, we welcome the bride, right? We welcome the Shabbat bride, the Shabbat queen. And now they're together again. So it's actually why, in this particular case, one of the rare instances, in this particular case, I would say that there actually is a little bit of a meaning to using some of the masculine language in these Psalms, is because these prayers do speak of God, these Psalms, as king, right? It's the masculine aspect of God. And it's God sits on the throne forever. God is enthroned forever and ever. And these are like those Psalms. Then we get to L'cha Dodi, and it's God's feminine side. It's Shekhinah, right? It's God's presence on earth that we're talking about more. And so depending on one's definition and one's theology and one's mystic leanings, it's almost like God is reunifying with God's self. The masculine and feminine aspects of God are coming together on Shabbat, okay? And by the way, again, not to be overly raunchy with this, but again, we're supposed to be like God, right? Imitatio Dei, where that's the Catholic version of it, but we're supposed to be like God, right? Be holy, for I am holy. That imitation is the highest form of flattery, etc., etc. Be like God. So as God rests on Shabbat, we rest on Shabbat. As God unifies with God's self on Shabbat, it is a mitzvah to engage in sex on Shabbat, because we are being like God. We are engaging in unification. We are engaging in that activity as 2 lovers have now found each other. So that's why it's a mitzvah on Shabbat to engage with your partner in sexual activity, in intercourse. So it's just fascinating to me. Thank you, mystics, once again, for giving us something different. So we go through, and there are other sort of interpretations about Sefirot, which unless you're really a mystic, you have to worry about so much. But the idea that these Psalms and Sefirot are linked together, and then on Shabbat, everything again comes together in a beautiful way. You'll never read it again the same. Ana Bakoach, which is also not in our liturgy, another one that was cut out, another one from our mystic friends in Sfat. It's a Kabbalistic poem that actually has 42 words in it, 7 lines, 6 words each. and it's an acrostic. It separates the Psalms from the Chadodi, so it gives us a little bit of space in between to meditate and do something different. So, has anyone heard before of gematria?
Yes.
Mhm.
The idea that every Hebrew letter has a number, right? That's a mystic innovation as well. You know, Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, etc., etc. And then the numbers, if you have numbers that add up of two different words the same, it means that maybe they're connected, right, in some way. So that's one way the mystics would interpret and engage in Torah and the Bible in a different way. There's another usage called notarikon. And notarikon is taking the first letter of consecutive words and then forming words out of them for special or sacred significance or meaning. So Ana Bakoach is a way of looking at that, a way of doing it. They take the first letter from each one and they form the 42-letter name of God. God's got a couple of long names. And so in our tradition, there's the 4-letter name, right? The Tetragrammaton, Yud-He, Vav-He. There are other names of God as well the mystics gave us, and one is 42 letters. To anticipate your question, we absolutely know how to pronounce it. We don't have any vowels for it, we just have the letters. So we have no way that we would even think that it would be pronounced. But we do know it's a divine name of God. We have enough in terms of pottery and other things that were created with this 42-letter name. It was on mezuzahs. It's actually in mezuzah scrolls, some of them, depending on where you buy it, written on the back. And so once again, because this thing is a lot of mishigas, but nice mishigas, but mishigas nonetheless, the Reform movement said, you know what, we don't need Ana Bakoach. We don't need this weird 42 letter name of God in our prayer book. It can go. It actually is a very nice prayer, but nonetheless. Okay. Gets us to L'cha Dodi, right? So the idea of Shabbat as a bride, that's an early rabbinic innovation. So that was in like the early work that was in the Talmud. That Rabbi Hanina here. Gary, going to give us a read?
Okay, number 5?
Yeah, right here with Rabbi Hanina over here.
Okay. Rabbi Hanina put on a robe and stood at sunset of Shabbat Eve and exclaimed, "Come and let us go forth to welcome the Queen of Sabbath." Our Janai donned his robes on Sabbath Eve and exclaimed, come, O bride, Shabbat 119a.
Indeed. And so that's a sort of Talmudic citation that we have this idea, this imagery of Shabbat as bride, Shabbat as queen, Shabbat as a feminine aspect, and we as Israel, the masculine aspect, in this case, being together, being reunited on Shabbat to the extent where, as the tradition teaches us, that they would dress up, everyone in the community, I think I'm really speaking about men to be fair, but people would dress up in white and they would go out into the fields and sing the Chadodi in their beautiful white garments to welcome the Shabbat queen, or the Shabbat bride, and go back into the synagogue for the rest of the service.
I find it kind of amazing considering they didn't think much of women.
Depends on the generation, but yeah, the Talmud's a little rough on women, without a doubt. Talmud's actually rougher on women than the Bible is. So the history didn't do well for women in that circumstance. I completely agree. Talmud it can be pretty tough.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty tough. I'm not going to tell you no. And then you have a friend here, our buddy here, Rabbi Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, who authored this poem and decided to have every verse start with his initial. And so it spells his name as it goes through. Modesty, one of my favorite rabbinic traits.
But the acrostics like that are pretty common. I mean, we've seen a couple others.
Yeah, definitely. It was just a way for them to be creative, and I frankly, I love language and wordplay and rhetoric, and so to me, I can sort of sympathize. I can sort of see them sitting around and trying to be creative, and you flex the intellectual muscles a little bit and sort of create a poem that has some different layers to it. And acrostic was a sort of a fun word game they did. This was a little bit self-promotional, but aside from that, you know, it's a nice idea, all right? The prayer itself, if you read the English of it, which we are going to look at, is full of messianic imagery, Israel's enemies being smacked around, following by rejoicing and gladness. So, of course, not surprisingly, the Reform movement, while we have kept the prayer in its entirety in Mishkan Tefillah on pages 138 and 139, as I say every week, that's why I can remember it, we usually sing half of the verses, not all the verses, the ones that are sort of less with that messianic imagery. So it's, you know, we sing verses 1, 2, 4, and 9, or whatever it is, 1, 2, 4, and 8, whatever it is. And that's the ones that we sing, because the other ones are, again, a little less theologically applicable. Though this is a greater conversation, of course, but I love Kabbalat Shabbat, and I just think that there's a lot of ways to engage in that part of the service a little bit more that I'd like to see us do a little more of in the future. One thing we mentioned, we talked about it last week a little bit too, is that, again, there's a little bit of that Hebrew barrier. It's like we sort of, like, we know what we know, and a lot of us are pretty comfortable with what we know. It's like when I grew up, you know, if I grew up in the Reform movement, like, V'ahavta wasn't said, you know, in Hebrew, my early days of the Reform Temple. And then when it was eventually said, it was read. And then eventually it was changed from English to reading Hebrew to chanting the Hebrew. And so we all sort of like moved forward in the Reformed synagogue of learning, you know, these prayers in Hebrew. But there are some prayers that every Friday night we read in Hebrew, and some prayers that we read in English, you know, because we have a certain level of Hebrew that we've become accustomed to in the service that we enjoy sort of, or feel meaning of in reading the Hebrew, where others we haven't really done it yet, you know, in Hebrew, as a movement, I'm saying, you know, and so one wonders about adding some more Hebrew, because again, the music is so great for Kabbalat Shabbat, can be so great, which is why, you know, we have the L'chuna Rananaz and the Shir Chadashes, you know, because these are Kabbalat Shabbat songs that we have created new music, new liturgy to, new melodies, I should say. So again, as I mentioned, you know, they cut out some of that stuff. Then the Shemor v'Zachor b'Dibur Echad, that we have the two tellings of the Ten Commandments found in the Torah, Exodus 28. Remember, Zachor, the Sabbath day. Deuteronomy says, observe Shabbat. And so the tradition teaches us that when God spoke at Mount Sinai, some people heard Shamor, some people heard Zachor. That's why we have it twice. That's the way to get around that idea. Instead of saying it was a mistake, someone heard it wrong, God said it at the same time, and depending on what we hear. Is it a blue dress or a gray dress or whatever that was, you know, a few years back?
Cover yourself.
Yeah, cover ourselves. Make sure that we have, because there can't be a mistake, so we just both. And we sort of went over Chatzi Kaddish already. You know, that it isn't really part of the Kabbalat Shabbat service in terms of part of the structure, but we have it there as it's, you know, again, our semicolon as our period. What I want to point out is that in Orthodox synagogue, you have it twice, which is more of a innovation of the editor. Because when the editor mushed all this stuff together, the Palestinian tradition had a Chatzi Kaddish after Psalm 92 and 93. And the Babylonian tradition had a Chatzi Kaddish, or better said, a Kaddish de Rabbanan, you know, another kind of Kaddish that is for teachers and students after the Mishnah. And so they mushed it together instead of taking one of them out. And so now that's all we have two, because the editor didn't know from taking it out. So they said, okay, now we have both. We combine the rights. We have both of these Chatzi Kaddishes in. So if you're ever in a conservative Orthodox synagogue and go, didn't we just do Chatzi Kaddish? That's why. It's an editorial device that it's there. So that is our introduction, but as we still have a few minutes left, thanks goodness, let's actually look at some of the liturgy.
Okay, so we're back to, is this the common order
Yes.
that we do the service in?
Yes.
Okay, so, and if I go to a conservative synagogue, they still do the service pretty much in the same order.
In the same order. Yeah, like this is the structure of Kabbalat Shabbat
Okay.
from beginning to end. And I added for you the stuff that isn't in our prayer books. I wanted to show you
Okay.
what other people were doing, as well. I didn't want you to feel shortchanged with just Mishkan Tefillah, but I want you to get the full
Flavor.
flavor. Thank you. Of it.
Yeah, I get that. I just
Rabbi, will you send us your outline again? That's very helpful. I could not write that all down.
Sure. I will send you the outline as
Thank you.
I'm just trying to mess up my screen for a minute so I can get this working.
that's just trying to-
God bless the CCAR. This was a nice idea to have Mishkan Tefillah online. It's not the easiest thing to use.
Is it online for all of us?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so. I think I found it. Yeah.
Yeah. We actually have it on our streaming page, though we have the old version. We have to actually update it because they changed, they repaginated it, as they say, to make it a little easier to use.
Well, that's okay.
But anyway, so if we were in our Mishkan Tefillah, we'd be on page, I think, 130 of Mishkan Tefillah is where we're starting from. And this is Kabbalat Shabbat, welcoming Shabbat. So as I mentioned, the first thing that we have is this group of Psalms. Psalm 95, 1 through 7. The Coon Naranana. And I'm trying to do this. Hold on. There we go. And we get the translation here. Come, let us sing joyously to Adonai. Let's sort of shout for our rock and deliverer. Let us come into God's presence with praise. Let us raise a shout for God in song. For Adonai is a great God, a great ruler, right? Because we're going to get a different translation than king, but a great ruler of all divine beings. And so that's sort of our translation. We have a little more on the other page, but you can see, it's about God's might. It's about God being a great ruler, here in this psalm. And you can remember, on Friday night, this is one of the you wind up the first stanza, so to speak, the first paragraph of this.
Since we don't do it, I didn't realize they're all in here. 95, 96, 97, 98, 99.
There you go. They're all here.
Yeah.
They're all there.
We never do any of the rest of them.
We do the first two, and then we don't do much of the rest of them. We sort of skip it over, which I think is a good discussion to take up with the ritual committee and find some ways to incorporate some different ones of these psalms in. Because variety is the spice of life.
And I'm assuming they have their own melodies, right?
Well, that's part of the fun, right? Is that each of these have 85 different melodies. And if we remember our friend, actually, I'm going to rephrase that as I finish the sentence. So there was a great sort of, spiritual leader, Shlomo Carlebach, right? And Shlomo Carlebach, he really did a lot of work with Kabbalat Shabbat and created a lot of melodies for them. Some of his stuff has gone into a little bit more of a disuse because of some of the less than savory things that may have happened during his life. And so, but with that said, he did a lot of nusach, a lot of melody for Kabbalat Shabbat.
Do you want me to interject something very important?
Please.
My father gave Shlomo Carlebach his very first job in
Oh, wow.
And
That's
where?
amazing.
Where was that, Tony?
New Jersey,
Oh, wow.
in Estelle Manor, New Jersey,
Oh, my.
at the Dorothy Synagogue.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
And I played piano together with him.
Wow.
Cool.
You were just a small, tiny little kid.
Oh, I wasn't even really here. I mean,
It's just, again, so he's written a lot of this fantastic spiritual music that is still very much in use in a lot of places. And so it's really, again, it goes to that issue of, separating the art from the artist can be sometimes a little tricky.
right.
But
He actually was a guest in Clearwater. We had him at Beth Shalom one night.
oh, wow. That must have been such an experience in terms of just the actual spiritual, because again, an amazing innovator of Jewish music.
What's the name?
Shlomo Carlebach.
So to do a Kabbalat Shabbat, we could do any of these 5 psalms?
Any, all, yeah.
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 It'd be kind of nice to expand the repertoire.
I wouldn't disagree with that sentiment at all. And so we have here, so like we do the Julie Silver, right? For this one over here, 96. You know, the where it has the English too. Sing unto God a new song.
Yeah.
So,
We sang that in choir.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, we've done this at Temple, though.
Say
I'm
again?
sorry?
We've done this at Temple.
Yeah.
This one, but not the next 3. That's what I'm saying.
Shir Hadash.
Yeah.
No.
And
Nice.
so we do these 2 usually. These 2 are our standards, like with Hunaranana and Shir Chadash have been the ones that we've been doing, and usually similar melody for each, right?
Right.
And over here, you can see the hand, right? You can see my cursor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so over here is another sort of very famously quoted part of the psalm. Yismech Hashamayim b'tagil aretz, Yeram Hayam, etc. all the way through.
Yeah.
And so that's 96. And then if we skip over here,
97, 98, 99. Yeah. See,
let me get this.
97.
So here's 97 on the bottom. Which, to be fair, this one, aside from over here, which we actually do a little bit of, depending on it's been a while, I guess. But the Or Zarua, I think we often do that on the, what's it called? What do we call it here? The, Friday Night Live, services.
Yeah.
You still use that name? Okay, yes, the Friday Night Live services.
Yeah, that's
so
Friday
like, we often do that, Or Zarua, and so we have, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so that's 97, so that little chunk of it.
98, which sounds a lot like 90.
Yeah, and so again, I didn't want to shortchange you on the English, but sing to Adonai a new song, glory and majesty, some of these like key words and to look at. These again, God is coming to rule the earth. God will rule the world justly, its people in faithfulness. 97, which we just looked at. Adonai is sovereign. Adonai then that Or Zarua, lightest one for the righteous.
Right.
And then 98. There we go.
Which is starts out similar to 96.
Yeah. And so sing praise with the lyre, with the lute, and the blast of the horn. All praise God, who is the ruler. So you see Melech, right? Melech, you're going to see a lot of times in these psalms about ruling, etc., etc. 99 literally starts with Adonai Malach, right? Adonai is enthroned above everybody. And then you'll see on the bottom of this one, just again to show that we actually do use some of these things, that's a Romemu. Romemu v'shtachalvu l'har kodsho, ki kadosh Eloheinu Romemu, right? And so we do use a little bit of that one as well. Then we get to my personal favorite, which is 29, which is this is again Shlomo Carlebach, but
David, the Psalm of David.
It's a great melody and just like energy and excitement, but it's all Hebrew, right? It's all the way through. So I used to daven, and when I was in rabbinical school at HUC, I would usually go to a conservative minyan because they did all the psalms that I liked. And the Reformed synagogues didn't do them. The Reformed psalms, congregations did 1 or 2, and I wanted to hear more of them. So I would go to a conservative minyan, and I would get a chance to do all of the psalms. And they would do this one all in Hebrew. And clapping and dancing along. But again, it's another one about glory and strength, and bow down, powerful leadership. And if we get to the end of it, I think we're usually familiar with the end of the psalm. Adonai oz la'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom, which was repurposed and used at the end of Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals. So that's why we're sort of familiar with that one. And again, God sat enthroned, God sits enthroned, sovereign forever, kingship, 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 all that good stuff. And then this is where we would have Ana Bakoach, that poem that is not in our book. And so then we would go from there to Lecha Dodi. But lucky for you is that I found, oh, come on. There we go. A little Ana Bakoach for us with an English translation. And you can see, so here in the acrostic form, so it would be Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Yud, Taf, Sadi, and that's 6 letters. And then I'll point out the second one only because, I've studied this a little bit. So you have Kuf, you have Resh, and you have Aleph. You have a Sin, a Tet, good Rabbi, a Tet, and a Nun here. So if you break that up into half, you get Kuf, Resh, Ayin, which in Hebrew means tearing, okay? It's ripping something apart. The second 3 letters, Sin, Tet, Nun, together, Satan, Satan.
The devil.
And so the adversary, indeed. So we have the idea maybe in that part of the name of ripping apart, tearing the adversaries, tearing bad stuff out. And so that might be one way of thinking about that part of the psalm in terms of its poetry and of the divine name of God, the 42-letter name of God. And you can just see it's actually pretty nice. It's a nice poem. If you would, with the power of your mighty hand, undo the knot that ties us up. You who are revered, accept the prayers of your people, raise us up, cleanse us. Almighty guard, if you would, as the apple of your eye, those who seek your unity. Bless them, cleanse them, etc., etc., etc. I don't have to go through the whole thing, but it's a very nice poem. I wouldn't mind having it. It's a nice poem.
And whose poem is this? I missed the beginning of it.
I'll go back up.
Back up a little.
So Rabbi Nechunya.
Oh, okay. This is the Ana Bakoach, right?
Ana Bakoach, yeah.
Okay.
Is this a modern day poem?
This is a
modern.
Yeah, the mystics, 16th century.
This is 16th century?
Yeah.
This is older than you think, yeah.
Yeah. And then we go from there back to our friend Lecha Dodi, which we do quite regularly as part of our liturgy. And then you see the Shin, the Lamed, the Mem, and the Hey for Shlomo. And then on this side, Halevi. And so you got his name put in there. Too soon.
It got folded.
There we go. And you can see in the translations that, keep and remember a single command that's Shamor v'Zachor. Come with me to meet the Shabbat, fountain of blessing. But then, we get to 3, which is Mikdash Melach Ir Melucha, so royal shrine, king of city of kings, rise up and leave your ravaged state. So it's a little bit, I don't have an objection to this theologically, but I'm just saying that, the people who were making some of these decisions, they put it all in, but these get sung more, less frequently. Jesse's son bringing deliverance into my life, right? So the Messiah, from the stump of Jesse, coming to save everybody. And so if you ever read the English here and you wonder why it's not really used, it's because really of the messianic imagery and the divine punishment for our enemies, also the good stuff that's in 6 and 7 that we don't use so much. But that is the Lecha Dodi, and then we are basically out, right, of Kabbalat Shabbat, except for 2 more Psalms for us. 92, which I remember we did 92. I was a couple months in. We did 92. Laura was singing this one, and it was the old school. God, it feels bad. I feel bad to say old school, but it was, the Jeff Klepper sort of like Mizmor Shir. Him and Danny Freelander. I think they did the melody for that one. It was the Matovu melody. And I just remember we sang it, and absolutely no one was singing it.
I only remember the beginning of it because it wasn't used very often.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those where it just didn't catch on. I just wonder if it was the week, but it was like an old school melody. Mizmor Shir the Yom HaShabbat.
That's all I remember is the first couple of lines.
Yeah. And then if that part isn't sung, usually what gets sung is this last piece over here. Sadi katamar yifrach ke'erez balvanan yisgeh. It's a beautiful, I don't know whose melody it is with that one. It's in my head, the melody I'm thinking of is a beautiful melody. And so that's what I remember from Psalm 92, was again the Jeff Klepper and the bigger sort of Sadika Tamar, more of a choral kind of piece. And 93, not much there, honestly, that gets used. I can't even think of my top of my head. I'm looking at the Psalm. There's one melody for this one. I don't know if I've ever heard this one sung.
I don't know this one at all.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, are we out of Kabbalat Shabbat now?
What?
Is this still Kabbalat Shabbat? Or
Yeah,
this is the part we're not using.
We're at the end of Kabbalat Shabbat, of all these different Psalms. And it goes back to the same idea. God is sovereign, robed in glory, girded with strength. God is creator, the God who causes all things to happen. Majestic on high. Amen, amen. Kabbalat Shabbat.
Oh.
And Shalom Aleichem comes in a little later. But then that gets us to, as I mentioned, it gets us to Chatzi Kaddish.
Yeah.
And that's our act break, right? That's our pause. And then once we hit Chatzi Kaddish, we know that we're ready to pray with Baruch Hu, which we get to next week. So that is Kabbalat Shabbat. Any questions?